You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, world, and welcome to Tales from Hollywoodland, a veritable feast of movies, Broadway, showbiz stories, news and gossip, with Julian Schlossberg, Arthur E. Friedman, and Stephen J. Rubin. Today, we talk all about the AFI Top 100 list. And now, here's Julian, Arthur, and Steve.
Hey guys, the American Film Institute, we could do a whole show on the meaning of the AFI, but it is one of the more respected educational organizations in the country. I believe it was started with a lot of good work by George Stevens Jr., son of the great film director George Stevens. The idea of having a federally sponsored organization that helped young film students. I mean, there have been a million film schools around the country, but I think AFI is considered one of the best, real hands-on training. And the nice thing about AFI, since it's located in Hollywood, so many famous people have come through AFI, both as mentors and as students. And of course, when somebody's putting together a list of the greatest movies of all time, the AFI list is considered respectful, but we are going to be a little disrespectful today.
I'm sure we all agree that we have the highest esteem and respect for the AFI. They're a tremendous organization and represent the film world as best as anybody possibly could. By the way, Lyndon Johnson was the president when this all started in 1967 or 1969, the AFI, a highly respected organization. They do make a top 100 list, and that's something that we're going to look into today. I reviewed it thoroughly, as I'm sure we all did. And in reviewing it, I noticed that Dr. Zhivago was not on the list of what top 100 films. Dr. Zhivago, of course, is a masterwork of David Lean, along with Bridget of the Raqua and Lawrence of Arabia, and maybe Ryan's Daughter. But Dr. Zhivago, to not be on the list of top 100 films, if it was made by someone named Jane Doe or Joe Doe, I'd say, well, okay, but AFI, hard to believe that one is off. So I looked in further. And here are some other films that are not on the AFI's top 100 list. And then we'll go over all kinds of stuff. And here they are. I mean, just some movies that should be on there, in my opinion, and are not on the list. Close Encounters of a Third Kind should be on that list. Third Man, not on the list. Paths of Glory, not on the list. The Great Escape. Patton. Stalag 17, Billy Wilder. Witness for the Prosecution. These are missing titles from the top 100 list. Hard to believe, but they're missing. A little movie called Moonstruck should probably be on that list. If you take a look at all of the hundreds that are listed, I think it belongs. The Longest Day, great movie, not on the list. Driving Miss Daisy, On Golden Pond. These are all titles that are not on the list. I'll put three out there that I think should be on the list. Rain Man is not there. Bugsy by Barry Levinson as well, not there. And The Natural, also a picture called Chariots of Fire. So the big question becomes, what happened that these pictures are not on the list? It's kind of interesting. Julian, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are a few. Number one, the idea that it's only English language right off the bat eliminates some of the greatest filmmakers that ever lived, from Truffaut to Fellini to Bergman, and some of the greatest movies ever made. So we'll say, okay, we'll give them a pass on that. American Film Institute, we're going to become Make America Great Again, I guess, and we're just going to be American films. Number two,
Julian, maybe they have a list of top foreign films, though. It's possible that it's separated.
Well, they list this as the top American films of all time. So that's their caveat.
Actually, it really depends, Steve, where you're looking. Some of it just say AFI top 100 movies. Most of the time, that's the heading. They don't say American. But anyhow, it's English language. We know that. That we're aware of. And according to what I was able to find out, has a lot to do with things like how important the film has held up within the public, what the critical reaction was to it, at least initially, and most importantly, I guess, where it stands, I guess, in history, what it meant culturally. But you see, what it meant culturally to me has changed so. So the question is, you take a movie like Easy Rider, which is on the list. Easy Rider, to me, is not a well-made movie. It changed a lot of things culturally. All of a sudden, Arthur and I were deep in the business, and everybody was making small movies all of a sudden after the success of Easy Rider. It couldn't have necessarily been under the critical area, but it could have been under the cultural change. So, okay, that's what we have. I have one of my favorite movies of all time is Gigi, one of the greatest musicals ever made, with a great cast, unbelievable production value, unbelievable score, and not listed. Tough for me. I love Singing in the Rain. That's my favorite, but boy, Gigi is right up there. How it cannot be. But here's the problem, guys. They do, and it's correct, they do a list of 100 great musicals, 100 great comedies, 100 great romances. At least that, to me, makes sense. That's at least going against another, not apples, oranges, pears, and bananas. All apples, all bananas. That's what it should be for me.
I agree with you 100%, Julian, because also I noticed the list is very, very light on science fiction. It's also very light on comedy, and almost no thrillers. There's just a few. And for instance, how could you not put Die Hard on the list? Die Hard spawned 1,000 similar movies over the years. And for me, Die Hard just changed the nature of thrillers, the way they are presented. And it's not on the list. So
I believe that as far as musicals are concerned, if they have a separate list, West Side Story, they list number 51 on this list. And so there's your musical breakthrough. I think Sound of Music's on here too, as it should be.
Yes.
And
Singing in the Rain. You can't.
And Singing in the Rain. These are musical pictures. So to not have a Gigi on there doesn't make sense. So that's a whole other part of what we're going to talk about here. And that is what they do have on the list. And we understand that a lot of this is subjective, but, I don't know. It would seem to me the AFI would make an objective choices. But I look here on the top 10, and here's the way they list the top 10. Citizen Kane, The Godfather, Casablanca. It's hard to argue with any of those. Raging Bull, I believe it belongs in the top 10. Sing in the Rain, yeah. Gone with the Wind for sure. Lawrence of Arabia, yes. Schindler's List, they have number 8. Wizard of Oz, number 10. And Vertigo is number 9. Subjectively, I would really debate that. I know a lot of people say, it's the greatest movie ever made. No, it's not. I mean, in that person's opinion, it might be, but please.
Well, Vertigo was a box office bomb when it opened. It's only been considered a classic probably over the last 20 years. 1958, he did so badly that Hitchcock completely dove into making his next movie a blockbuster. And of course, that was North by Northwest, probably one of the most entertaining movies of all time. And of course, North by Northwest is on the list at 55.
Well, let's move it up to 9.
I agree. I would replace Vertigo with North by Northwest 9 times out of 10.
I think Dr. Zhivago could be number 9 faster than anything. It's not on the list at all. Again, these things perhaps are subjective opinions, but a picture like Dr. Zhivago or Close Encounters of a Third Kind have to be in the top 20 on this list. They're not on the list.
Well, it is subjective. It is subjective. Clearly, it's personal and subjective, but the criterion, it's, as I said earlier, this criterion is rather strange within itself. Citizen. I mean, I've seen lists. I bet you all have where Vertigo is number one.
Yeah, well,
So I don't know. One of the things I'd like to talk about is from all our points of view, including Mike. What are the movies that you feel should be on that have not been put on? Besides what Arthur and I said, do you two guys have any films that you feel should have been included besides, as you said, Steve, science fiction?
Well, if you're going to do science fiction, for me, it starts with the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, which has a timeless quality about it. Now, that's 1951. For many years, science fiction movies did not have great respect. It wasn't until the beginning of the 1950s, which kind of followed the flying saucer craze, that all of a sudden Hollywood woke up and said, we got to start making these science fiction movies for the kids. And I think the young audience embraced them enormously, as did I. But that's one movie that really jumps out at me that was not on the list. And like I said, there's only a couple of science fiction movies on the list. You got 2001 and Star Wars. But Arthur's right. I don't see any Close Encounters, and that was a real terrific film.
I think they have Blade Runner on,
which always mystifies me. And with all due respect to Ridley Scott, who is a master filmmaker, I would replace Blade Runner with Gladiator any day of the week, because I found Gladiator vastly entertaining, and I find Blade Runner very dull in patches, and I'm probably going to get attacked.
But they do have it at 97, just for
Yeah, I mean, visually, it's a stunning movie, and certainly it is a visual feast. But story-wise, I found it to be such a dreary movie. But I can't, that's just one reporter's opinion.
But another part of the conversation are the numbers on the listings. Example: the French Connection they have is number 93. Guys, yeah. French Connections should be way up on the list, not at 93.
Well,
so
that's William Friedkin. If you've got French Connection, where's The Exorcist? The Exorcist was a huge movie in its day and still continues to be studied. I would think that The Exorcist would be on that list.
Yeah, I don't know that they're doing it by box office.
No, they're not. They're definitely not doing it by box office.
Chinatown is number 21, might be a little higher than that. The Graduate's number 17. Sunset Boulevard is number 16. That certainly deserves a top 20 film. Space Odyssey is number 15. Well, we can talk about that. What do you all think of Space Odyssey?
I'm still trying to figure it out after all these years.
Yeah, me too.
I have to say, I was told, I don't know how true it is, that Kubrick called the computer HAL because he took the letters before IBM. IHAL. I hope that's true.
I think the success of 2001 is directly related to the rise in the use of hallucinogenic drugs, because most of the people who went out and said it's the greatest movie of all time were higher than a kite.
Steve, we had the Harvard Square Theater in Cambridge. We played it as a midnight show on a Saturday night. Went into the theater, and my God, the entire theater was pot smoke. And everybody was like, they weren't sitting in their seats; they were laying in their seats. Hey,
I think you had to be high to understand what the movie was about. I think even Kubrick had trouble explaining it, but it was visually stunning. The special
it was great during the prehistoric time at the beginning. I understood banging the rocks and the rock goes in, and that was great. But after that, but I played it at the Ziegfeld Theater, and like the Harvard Square, we had a fumigate at the end of the evening. I mean, you'd walk into the theater, you could be absolutely sober. There's no way you could stay there 10 minutes and not get high. No, it's impossible. So I ran out.
Well, back to things like Vertigo at number 9. That's another conversation is not so much what's left off the list, but how they rated these things.
I mean,
does anybody here believe that Vertigo should be number 9 on the top 10 list?
Vertigo is one of those movies that if you really, really love it, it is a terrifically poetic film. However, I will say, if you take out the Bernard Herrmann music, that movie sits like a lump of clay. Talk about music really building the tension in a movie. And I'm a huge Bernard Herrmann fan, as was Hitchcock. And I think that it's woven so beautifully into the film. Jimmy Stewart, one of my favorite actors of all time. It was an unbeatable combination. And does it deserve to be top 10? No. Like I said, let's take number 9, Vertigo, and replace it with North by Northwest in a hot second.
But I wouldn't replace it with North by Northwest because I don't believe that was that good a movie either. That's just, again, we're talking subjective, and there I am.
Well, it looks like you got 2 out of 3 against you, babe, because I want North by Northwest in there too.
Look at these movies behind. All About Eve is number 29, 26. Are you kidding? And I'm sorry, All About Eve is number 28. Double Indemnity is number 29. And Vertigo is number 9. No way. So again, when they made up this list, as Julian said, how do they do it? What's their criteria? What were they doing? This is a great organization. You're not talking about shop liver here. This is the AFI.
By the way, 10 years after 2001, exactly 10 years, Coppola does Apocalypse Now. And I would maintain that that's another movie that people saw high, because if you had to be high to understand what Marlon Brando was mumbling in the last third of the movie. That was my biggest complaint about Apocalypse Now. You've got Marlon Brando mumbling. How entertaining is that?
Oh, how about the fact that the movie spends 3/4 of the time saying, man, wait till you see Kurtz, wait till you see Kurtz, wait till you see Kurtz. You know, and then you see Kurtz's big blob who is babbling away, and who cares? I mean, it was a pretty good movie up until then, I thought.
And Kurtz was Betty Grable's legs.
Yeah, that's right. Mike, what about you? Is there a film or two that you'd like to see on this list?
I would have loved to seen something like Young Frankenstein on this list.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
absolutely.
But like Steve was saying earlier, it didn't seem like there was a lot of comedy representation on here at all.
They don't have a Woody Allen film on.
They don't.
Maybe they have
Annie Hall has got to be.
They have Annie Hall at least.
They have Annie Hall, but they're missing something like.
Yeah, number 35.
Well, that's good, but that's probably the only one. And when you have that work that he's done, of course, there's been a problem with him personally, but there's a lot of problem with Picasso too.
Oh, yeah.
You don't say his work isn't good.
No, but it's also missing. It's a mad, mad, mad world. You know, which would have definitely been on my top 100 list.
Which one, Mike?
It's a mad, mad, mad world.
Yeah, fun movie.
Yeah. And you know,
well, here's Sound of Music is on there, so the musicals are on. To leave put in Sound of Music and West Side Story and not have Gigi again makes no sense. Do you think that Dr. Strangelove might be a number 9 rather than Vertigo? Because Dr. Strangelove is number 39. It's just it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. No, there's other musicals that I think definitely deserve to be up there that are not up there. And there's so much, but it's all also subjective, as we've been saying. You know, each one of us has a list probably of 100 that should be on the top 100. And that's the interesting thing with this.
Well, yes, it is. But what I maintain is that, again, every person has their own opinions on movies. We understand that. This is the AFI, and they're great. We love them. I mean, I can't say things that are. I can't say nice enough things about the AFI and what they do. But I would like to think that I'd like to know how they chose this list. I guess is what I'm saying. That's where this show. It would be great if we could have one of the people who did the choosing on the show as a guest and ask, where are you at with this? How does this work? King Kong, number 41, maybe, I don't know, but there's got to be a way they did this. Goodfellas, number 92.
Well, they went around to critics and executives and people in the business. It wasn't done arbitrarily. They did go to supposedly a lot of experts. And again, we've said it 100 times. It's totally personal. It's totally subjective. And frankly, I think all of us could probably put as Mike said, a list together, and I would say maybe 2/3 of that list would be on it, but a good third would not.
Here, according to Google, the American Film Institute Top 100 list was chosen by a poll of more than 1,500 artists and leaders in the film industry who chose from a list of 400 nominated movies. So they were primarily dealing with films that have been nominated by the Oscar Academy, which is...
Are you sure it was from the Oscars? Are you sure that was the criteria?
I think so. I think
400?
they say the 400 nominated movies. So when they say nominated movies, you generally conclude that must be the Oscars, because the only organization that has the respect is, to me, the Oscar Academy.
But I could interpret it, Steve, another way, which is that these were the ones that these people together nominated. Not necessarily from the Oscars. I don't think they would do that I don't think that would be their criterion, but we should try to find out.
We can. You're absolutely right. Absolutely.
I think that some of these choices on the top 100, if you look at them real hard, are basically indefensible. It is indefensible to not have Dr. Zhivago or Close Encounters of the Third Kind on the list at all. There's no case that can be made for that. So, as I say, it would be great to have somebody on who maybe thinks, well, here's why it shouldn't be. I don't know what that argument would be, but let's go back to the top 10 and see if we disagree with what's on the top 10. Let's just stay there. Do we all agree Citizen Kane should be there?
Now, I've came to the party very late with Citizen Kane. I've been hearing about this movie for years. This movie is 83 years old. I finally sat down last year and watched it from stem to stern, and I thought that it was a very well-made movie. But I will also say that the last third of the movie, Orson Welles gets very repetitious. I think Citizen Kane is always nominated as a Best Picture candidate because of its filmmaking technique. Orson introduced a lot of things in movies that had not been done before, in terms of flashbacks, in terms of the use of light. I think Greg Toland was the cinematographer and did incredible things with the use of light. It's a movie that's studied incessantly in film schools. But I could probably name 20 movies I would put at number one ahead of Citizen Kane. Now, like I said, Citizen Kane's 83 years old. There are newer movies of the last 50 years that I would put ahead of it. I would put The Godfather as number one, not number two.
They have it as number two, but I respectfully disagree with you, Steve. Citizen Kane is, if it's not number one, it's certainly a top 10 film. It's one of the greatest films I've ever seen. So I respectfully disagree. I think Julian probably does too, but I won't speak for him. Julian, do you respectfully disagree?
Well, it's a funny thing. You start out with the fact that a man made a movie, his first movie. He had never made a movie before. And we're now talking about 83 years ago, as Steve said. The idea that he actually dug holes on the floor, Greg Toland, and it was Greg Toland, to put the camera in places that no one had ever shot before. So what is, the criterion? Is it how important the film was then, or is it only how important it is now? I would argue that then it would definitely be the number one film. Now I would have to say I don't think so. I just don't.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a number one film. I'm saying it's certainly a top 10 film, but if as number one, I couldn't argue with it. I certainly couldn't argue with Godfather or Casablanca, which they have as number three, or Raging Bull. Raging Bull is just an outstanding, incredible movie, especially if you come from the Bronx like we do. But what a movie. Lawrence of Arabia, can't argue with it. Schindler's List, these are the top 10. Vertigo, we've mentioned already. I would argue with that all the way. Wizard of Oz, number 10. Can't argue with that. So if there's a couple of movies in here that we would replace, what would we replace them with in the top 10? Anybody? Star Wars? Network? Cabaret?
It just, it's so hard to do this, for me anyhow, because...
That's the purpose of what we're doing.
No, I'm saying, but it's difficult because it's difficult because they're, again, I would say there are great musicals. How do you compare a great musical to a science fiction movie or whatever? It just they're not comparable. So I don't know. Anyhow, my number one movie would be Casablanca. I think it's a perfect movie. I've never, ever, ever not watched it where I said there's not a moment that I didn't think I would have trimmed or cut or anything. It's just perfect. And the irony of it is they didn't even have a script. At night, they were writing the Epstein brothers and Howard Koch, not the Howard Koch that we knew, author, but they were writing at night for the next day. Bogart was moaning about the fact they didn't have the lines. But when it's all said and done, to me, great. And I would put Godfather number 2. I loved it. Just loved it.
We played Casablanca at the Gateway Theater in Fort Lauderdale as part of a classic film festival. I went over there on a Saturday night. We had a full house. Casablanca stands up 1,000% in front of that audience. They loved it. And you could see it's on the screen. So if one of the questions is, well, how do you figure this out? It's in the eyes. Look at it. Look at the movie. Does it stand up? Does it not stand up? Citizen Kane to me stands up. My God, it's a great film. But I guess the controversy of all this is that we all have our choices, and then there's the people who love certain obscure movies. One of the things they've done here is they've put a lot of silent films on the top 100, and I think that should be a separate list. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. It should be a separate list. They're great movies. Griffith made them. They did put Intolerance in. By the way, they took Birth of a Nation off. The woke world won again. Off with the Birth of a Nation. But Intolerance is a magnificent motion picture. But silent films, you have The General. I mean, you have some great movies, but I don't know how, again, you compare one with dialogue and one without. You could compare photography. I guess you could do photography, but that's about it.
What is Sunrise, a Song of Two Humans from 1927, listed at number 82? I never heard of it. Anybody?
Oh, I've heard of it. I've never seen it, but I certainly have heard of it. It's one of the most famous films, obviously, of that period.
Have you heard of it, Steve?
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
I heard of Sunrise, Sunset. That's a song from Fiddler.
Well, yeah, Annie Hall I see as number 35. Bridge in the River Kwai, number 36. To me, that's a top 10 film. Anybody disagree?
I agree 100%. In fact, if I would take Raging Bull, which is a very good movie, and I could easily replace it with Bridge in the River Kwai. In fact, I would keep Raging Bull there. I would take out Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind has been disparaged.
Ooh. Wow.
I'm sorry, Victor Fleming. Sorry, Clark Gable. Sorry, Vivian Lee. By the way, for the first time, and I've had to catch up on some of the films because I had gaps. For the first time last week, I watched number 47, A Streetcar Named Desire. I'd never seen Kazan's masterpiece. And after seeing Vivian Lee portray Blanche Dubois, I was in true awe of her performance.
I represented Kazan for 40 years on a handshake on the 3 movies he made for Warner Brothers that reverted to him after 10 years. That was Facing the Crowd, Baby Doll, and America, America. What I want to tell you about Streetcar will fascinate all of you. I hope it fascinates the listener, but I know you guys will be. We all know how much time it takes for actors to sit around and wait while the crew sets up the lights. It's an enormous time. It could be days or weeks, but it certainly is hours. Kazan, knowing that he was making A Streetcar Named Desire in an interior movie like 12 Angry Men, basically in one set, he built the set twice next to each other. He built the 2 sets next to each other. So the actors rehearsed in one while the crew set up the lights and whatever they had and set the props. And then he just took them from there, fresh from the rehearsal. Nobody waited, and they shot. And you can see that how brilliant Brando is in that movie. Vivian Leigh, Kim Hunter, Carl Malden. It's an incredible movie. But what a brilliant thing to do. Now, economically, it's expensive to do something like that. But maybe at the end it's not, because you're certainly going to come in under budget and under time. So it's interesting.
Well, I think his On the Waterfront is probably, if not his main masterwork, it's right up there.
Oh, sure, I agree.
On the Waterfront, an incredible film.
Certainly he was a Brando fan. I think I've read over the years that Brando's style of acting, introduced in pictures like Streetcar, was so different than a lot of the male acting that was going on in those days. I think they said that he brought a kind of physical, just a palpable emotional texture to his performance that you hadn't seen. Julian, you're the master of this kind of discussion. What's your feeling about Brando and why he was so unique?
I'll tell a story that Kazan told me. In On the Waterfront, Brando is walking and starting to get involved with Eva Marie Saint. She drops a glove. He picks it up, and he starts to put his fingers in the glove in a very sensual, sexual way. Not in the script at all. Kazan told me, I said, because I asked him, was that in the script? He said, no. I said, so it was all Brando? He said, I made one contribution. I said, what? When she dropped the glove, the cameraman said to me, should I cut? And Kazan said, I'll kill you if you cut. So, yes, I would say that Brando was an extraordinary actor. And it's very interesting that today the younger actors worship Sean Penn. That's their Brando of the day. When we speak with them, they all talk in how great Sean Penn is. So it does change as it goes along. But the thing about Brando was, as you said, you just felt that pain or you felt that anger, and it came across celluloid, which is not easy.
There was a young man who came out to California, and his dad had called me and said if he could possibly have lunch with him. He went to film school and be helpful in any way, which I was happy to do. So I had lunch with the young guy, and nice fella. Went to film school, and I said, one of the things I think it's important for any film school student is to watch the classics. Look at the classic movies, get yourself a DVD, and sit down and watch the classics. You want to be an actor? You want to take a look at, let's say, On the Waterfront and look at Marlon Brando. And so, wait a minute, wait, how does Marlon Brando, is that Marlon? He's writing it down. And I said, you've never heard of Marlon Brando? And he said, no. Is that Bran? I said, what film school did you go to? Where you didn't, and I won't mention which one, but he'd never heard of Marlon Brando, and he's looking to be an actor. It would seem to me that anybody who's looking to be an actor would want to go back and take a look at him, and also take a look at Jimmy Dean, and even certainly Cary Grant, and the great film actors. But back to the list, they have movies here like Network at 64. I mean, I don't know. To me, it should be higher than that. Duck Soup at 60. Rocky at 57. Great movie. Taxi Driver at 52. Do we agree with that?
I don't. No, I certainly don't think so.
We agree it should be on the list.
Nope, not in the first 100. It's a well-made movie, but I don't see it in there. I don't see Forrest Gump there in the first 100. I mean, it's
no, Forrest Gump's there. Forrest Gump's there.
No, I say I don't see it as one that I would put in the first 100. Yeah, no, I know it's there. That's that.
Here's a movie I would never put into this list, and that's called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf at 67. Why?
I can't answer that why. I can't answer that why. I love Mike, and I know it was his first movie. It was a huge success, nominated for 5 Academy Awards, but it wouldn't be in my first 100 either.
Yeah, so there you have a situation where you have Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf at 67 and Saving Private Ryan at 71. It just makes no sense.
Well, getting back to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, the film that beat it for Best Picture that year isn't on the list. At least I haven't seen it. It's A Man for All Seasons. Now, for
Should
many,
absolutely be on the list.
for many years, and when it comes to 66, the film I'm a big fan of that year is Robert Wise's The Sand Pebbles, which gave Steve McQueen his only acting nomination. But I always said that, what is this movie, A Man for All Seasons, which I hadn't seen? How could you beat The Sand Pebbles, which was just a really terrific movie, very, very prescient movie for our Vietnam experience. And yet I finally saw A Man for All Seasons. It's a stunning achievement. And Paul Scofield is amazing in the lead character in that movie. And yet A Man for All Seasons, neither Man for All Seasons or The Sand Pebbles from that year are not on the list. And you've got Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which could easily be replaced by either of those.
Well, A Man for All Seasons, if you think that Paul Scofield was great in the movie, you should have sat on Broadway to watch that man do A Man for All Seasons. If you wanted a top 10 list of the greatest Broadway performances I've ever seen, Paul Scofield in A Man for All Seasons.
What a great actor. What a great actor.
Ian McKellen in Amadeus. Paul Muni in Inherit the Wind. I saw the greats on stage, and I'll never be unhappy about that aspect of it.
Paul Scofield is in two of my favorite, most underrated movies. One is a movie called Train, John Frankenheimer, with Burt Lancaster, Jean Moreau. Love that movie. Another is called The Quiz Show, that Robert Redford directed. Paul Scofield, fantastic in that. He's great in anything he did.
He was.
Great actors.
Mark Van Doren, he played the historian Mark Van Doren, the father of
Oh boy, it's a great, great film. And then there's another little thing called Judgment at Nuremberg, and I would debate that it has to be one of the great performances of all time was
Maximilian Schell.
Maximilian Schell. Wow,
Well, speaking of Stanley Kramer, another film of his I would put on the list immediately is On the Beach. Where's On the Beach?
It's on the beach.
It's in beach.
It's sitting on the beach. It should be on the list.
Right behind you.
You know what's interesting, guys? I just finished a book written by a gentleman named Scott Iman. I'd like to see if we can get him as a guest, which is John Wayne, The Life and the Legend, a 900-page book. A great book about John Wayne. Very interesting guy. As he says in the book, Cary Grant and Gary Cooper and those guys are basically gone. John Wayne lives on. He became an institution. They have listed here as number 12, The Searchers. Do we agree with that?
Yes. I am such a student of John Wayne, and interestingly, it's the only film of his on the list. I think they bypassed True Grit, which is probably his second most famous. But there's 10 other John Wayne movies I could easily put on the list for my own purposes, but they would probably not be there. I mean,
well, certainly Stagecoach would be one, and it was on the list. It was on the original list, and it got knocked off.
Well, they don't have Red River. Red River is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
Great movie.
Howard Hawks.
And his Cavalry trilogy, anchored by the first one, Fort Apache, is one of the great Westerns. There's not a lot of Western glory here in the top 100 list.
Well, I hope they have High Noon. I hope they do.
They do.
High Noon is there. High Noon is there.
They have Unforgiven, the Eastwood Unforgiven, great movie.
Butch Cassidy is there.
Yeah.
They always put the Wild Bunch on these lists. It's number 79. I would always say that I'm a much bigger fan of The Professionals, which is a Richard Brooks film with Lee Marvin, Burt Lancaster, Woody Strode, and Robert Ryan. I find that a far better film and far
But I think, Steve, what happens here is the Wild Bunch kind of revolutionized things. Did that come before Bonnie and Clyde or after?
After.
Bonnie and Clyde
is 67, I believe, and Wild Bunch is 69.
Well, Wild Bunch wouldn't make in my top 100 whatsoever. You know, it's interesting. To me, I want to be moved. I want to walk into a movie, one feeling, and have another when I leave. I want to know that the movie changed how I was thinking or feeling. The Wild Bunch didn't do that for me. It's just a violent movie, and it's a Western. It's okay. But, you know, when we talked earlier about Casablanca, we talked about Godfather. It's incredible. These films move you. Yeah. And that's what, to me, is the most important thing.
Remember a little movie called Defiant Ones?
Sure.
Tony Curtis, Sidney Poitier.
I wonder how it holds up today.
Julian, if you want to be moved, you should put Earthquake on the list.
I put it in the Ziegfeld. We had sense around. We shook the damn theater, Steve. However, it wouldn't make my first 300, let alone 100.
It's a lousy movie, but I will pick a top 100 disaster movie in a hot second. I will pick The Towering Inferno, the best of the disaster movies.
I'd burn it down, Steve.
No, wouldn't make my 100.
I'd burn it right down for me.
Here's a movie they listed at number 83. And this is a truly great movie, apart from being the biggest grossing movie of all time. Titanic at number 83. Great film.
Not for me.
Well, you know, it's a great movie. I mean, you look at
a friend of mine. I went with a friend of mine who's turned to me at one point and said, "When is this boat going to sink?"
Yeah, well, it sunk to about $2 billion.
Yeah, well, but it's not about money. We're trying to talk about quality, not about money. This is a damn capitalist country. We've got to get to quality a little bit.
In my opinion, there are certain movies that are big, huge hits that are not just commercial and blah, blah, blah. Jaws is one of them. E.T. is one of them. Titanic is one of them. These are not bad movies.
Okay, we're talking about a lot of movies that are now 25, 30 years old. Can someone name a movie in the last 20 years, since 2000, say 2004, that you would put on your top 100 list?
That's a great question, and I know right now my answer. I can't.
I would say King's Speech, and King's Speech does not appear in here.
Good movie, no question. I don't know
movie.
If it's in the top 100, but it's a damn good movie. I agree, Arthur. I don't know if it makes it in the top 100.
Top 100 based on some of these titles.
Now, are three movies that I thought were wonderful. They're probably not top 100s, but I found them just completely entertaining. One was Ridley Scott's The Martian, Matt Damon. I think that movie is enormously entertaining and fascinating to watch. The other movie is the latest Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is fascinating the way he takes apart a real story and turns it into a myth. Both of those movies would be in my top 100.
Pulp Fiction is on here, right?
Pulp Fiction is on there. That's the only, I think, the only presence of Tarantino.
Here's two films that are missing. One is called Risky Business. Great little movie, Tom Cruise.
Sure.
And the other one's called Rain Man. Rain Man's a great film. Won the Academy Award.
Is Fargo on there? Is Fargo on that list?
Fargo is not on the list.
And I'll tell you, that's one of the best movies I've seen.
Fargo is on the list.
Great picture.
Is it on the list?
Yes, it is.
Well,
Fargo's on there, Mike?
This is the controversy. Is it on the list? Is it not on the list?
Actually, Fargo was on the previous list. It was one of the films that came off.
So it's not on the up-to-date list.
Exactly.
And therefore, I protest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to throw out a title that for me is personally a good top 100 list, but isn't within striking distance, is the James Bond movie Goldfinger, 1964, celebrating its 40th anniversary. 60th anniversary this year. Goldfinger is a perfect Bond movie.
Not on the list.
Is he the man with the Midas touch?
A spider's touch.
I thought so. Tell me, guys, Is Amadeus on the list at all?
No.
It's not on the list. Unbelievable.
Come on. I mean, I want a new list. Right now, I feel we have to, you know what we should do? We should form our list. Not tonight or today, whatever time it is. But we should form our list and maybe send it to them.
You know, it's interesting. They do these lists now where they take the Oscars and they give you the alternative Oscars, you know, because over the course of time, Oscars have made some very curious choices for Best Picture. The most glaring, of course, was 1952, when they put Cecil B. DeMille's The Greatest Show on Earth ahead of High Noon, which to me was a gross.
The Greatest Show on Earth is nowhere near the top 500.
Now, I have to tell you, Julian, I actually liked The Greatest Show on Earth because I'm a big...
When was the last time you saw it?
I saw it last year. And
no kidding. And you liked it?
I liked it. It's because I like three of the characters, actually four of the characters. I like Charlton Heston. I like... I'm forgetting her name.
You don't like her that much, Steve.
Yes. Well, there's Gloria Graham, and then there's Betty Hutton, and Cornell Wilde. Cornell Wilde is wonderful as the trapeze artist, along with Betty Hutton. The characters are fun, but the way the circus is portrayed, the acts are done with such lifelessness. It could have been done much better.
How about the Sting? Is the Sting on there?
Nope.
It has to be.
Come on.
No, I mean, it's not on the list.
Now, I think I've had just about enough of this list.
Right. Well, that's the point of the whole show.
Oh, good. I mean, not having the Sting, some of these, Gigi, I'm having a tough time. The Third Man? Oh, my God, Harry Lime doesn't make the list? Please.
I mean, Sophie's Choice at number 91. Sophie's Choice was a good movie. Was it one of the greatest movies of all time? I think more people have forgotten Sophie's Choice than remember it.
So that's not a choice for you, obviously.
Obviously not my choice. Stephen's choice is to replace it.
One of the movies that are missing here, too, is a great movie that arguably has as great a film score as ever been done, and that would be The Natural, with Redford, directed by Levinson, and the score by Randy Newman. That movie comes flying off the screen when the ending of that movie is unbelievable. The mix of the score plus the vision.
Did you guys like Shakespeare in Love?
I liked it. Wouldn't put it on this list.
Okay.
No, wouldn't make the list for me either.
Okay.
No.
How did Patton get left off? One of the great performances of all time, George C. Scott.
That was surprising to me too.
It's interesting because Patton is not on the list, but the movie MASH is.
Yeah.
And I didn't...
A groundbreaker, Mike. It was a groundbreaker.
But MASH was taken off this list, Mike. Oh, no, you're right. It's 50.
It's on here.
It's on there.
No, it's there.
No, yeah. What Arthur said is right. MASH changed the playing field for a lot of movies after that, as Jaws did years later. I mean, that's why I guess one of their criterions that because I go back to why would Easy Rider be on there as the top 100 movies unless it was the idea that culturally it did change, and it did change the movie business. I mean, they were making Strawberry Statement, the Magic Garden of Stanley Sweetheart. I mean, they were making movies for the young people, they thought, and every one of them bombed. Everyone.
Here's an interesting one. There was a director's sneak preview of a movie called Nashville in Boston at the Sharif Theater. And I was involved with the people who own the theater. So I was sitting next to Robert Altman, president of the theaters. The circuit of theaters was sitting on the right. Robert Altman was sitting in the middle. And I'm sitting on the left to Altman. And the movie is playing. And as the movie's playing, the audience starts booing. And after they start booing, they start walking out. And Robert Altman says, "They love my movie. Look at this. It's great. They're loving it. They're walking out on it, Bob."
You sure
this list,
Arthur,
it's number 59.
Arthur, are you sure they weren't going out to get popcorn?
I'm sure.
Nashville was a very interesting movie for me, Arthur and Steve and Mike. It was, I think, his best movie. And so I don't mind it. I don't mind it being on the list, but I would probably make it 100 or 99.
I think his best movie was Player.
Yeah, that was a good movie,
and
but
it certainly wasn't Popeye.
But I think Player is more for people in the business than for the public.
Well-made film, though. Boy, good film.
It was indeed.
Well, anyway, they have Nashville at number 59. That's a tough one. Jaws at number 56. I don't know.
I'd move Jaws up.
Me too. Cabaret at number 63.
I think Jaws would take a big bite out of this list.
Yeah. You know what's an interesting choice here, too, is Sunset Boulevard. To me, that's if ever I've seen a top 10 film, that's it. Number 16, it's close at least. The Graduate, 17. I understand that. The General, 1926.
Oh, that belongs on the silent.
One of the great Buster Keaton movies of all time, but not in this list because you shouldn't be putting silent movies with talkies.
Here's a comedy that I think should be on the list, and we talk about Danny Kaye quite a bit because we love Danny Kaye. What about The Court Jester? Isn't that a perfect spoof?
Palace with the Chalice?
The Chalice with the Palace.
With the vessel? Yeah, it's a great
The
movie.
Vessel with the Pestle.
Has the brew that is true.
That is true. That's Sylvia Fine, and we should all recognize the great Sylvia Fine, who was married at that point to Danny Kaye and wrote all these extraordinary lyrics, and a woman I knew very well. Here's
Chinatown at number 21.
Move it up.
That belongs.
Move it up.
Yeah, let me move it up. It's a great movie. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 26. High Noon, 27. All About Eve, number 28, and that is a world-class movie. All that dialogue.
Yeah.
Double Indemnity, 29. So I understand those, sure, 30.
It's interesting 25. They put Maltese Falcon on at 31, but they did not put, as I recall, The African Queen, which is arguably one of Bogey's best performances.
You sure they missed that, Steve?
I'm looking. Oh, no, I'm wrong. It's at 65. Okay, so at least they got that one covered.
Yeah. Well, look, again, to show you the craziness of the list, and with all due respect to the AFI, I mean that. It's hard for me to have Godfather number 2 and Godfather Part 2 number 32. That makes no sense whatsoever. That is an entry if ever I've seen one. They're both number 2, so.
Okay, so I'm going to go around the room now. Your 2 favorite movies of all time on your own personal list. 2 favorite movies. We'll start with Mike.
Of course.
Poor Mike.
Oh, I know. Truthfully, one of them you've already mentioned, which was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I definitely think should be on the list. Would be probably in the top 10. But also, I'm thinking I'd love to see Close Encounters on this list.
Sure.
And also, I know Judy would kill me if I didn't include this. Probably The Music Man, also Robert Preston, I think.
Great movie, fun movie.
Yeah, and it's a great adaptation of the musical and of the Broadway play. So I think they carried it over, and it's timeless. It's one of those movies that takes you back whenever you watch it, and it's one of those that capture it also. So those would be my 3. And I didn't see on this The Dark Knight, also by Christopher Nolan, would probably be 4.
Batman.
Yeah.
There's a movie here listed as number 98 that I defy anybody to tell me that should be 98 and not much lower. Yankee Doodle Dandy. Jimmy Cagney at his best. Great movie, musical, certainly. But
Arthur, what's your favorite 2?
If I had to choose my favorite films, Bridge into Requai would probably be a real strong number 1. And Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I'm only kidding.
Made me laugh.
Quai and Casablanca probably.
There you go.
You know,
Julian?
It works. It works.
Casablanca, Godfather, and I'm Singing in the Rain.
Godfather. How can I leave it out? Yeah.
And
it's an impossible choice.
My top film of all time. My top film of all time isn't on the list. The Great Escape.
Oh, yeah. Not on the list.
Not on the list. And my second favorite, I would have to go with Julian, Singing in the Rain.
Yeah. You know, when Frank Sinatra died, Larry King did a special show on him. And as his guests, he had Steve Lawrence and Vic Damone and Tony Bennett discussing Sinatra. And Larry King threw out, says, if you had to choose one great Sinatra recording, what would it be? And Steve Lawrence said, it's impossible. You can't possibly choose one. He had too many. And they all said the same thing. That's kind of true here. It's hard to choose one or two. I mean, you know, 100 may be too many, but certainly 20 is not, and probably 50 is not. But sure, you know, Close Encounters have got to be up there, guys. It can't not be on this list. Dr. Zhivago cannot be on this list. I'll give you a movie that I would put on any list, and that's Day of the Jackal, not mentioned here. Wasn't a very popular movie, big book, but a great movie, original.
We should, we'll devote a show. We should also have our guilty pleasure list, which are movies that perhaps some people think are awful, but we love them. Everybody has a guilty pleasure.
I don't want to feel guilty about it, Steve.
Steve, where do they have All the President's Men?
It's there. It's there.
Oh, it better be. It better. You know, a movie that I'm sure they don't have. Oh, and it answers a question in the last 20 years, I have to say. Good Night and Good Luck. I thought
great
that
movie.
Was a terrific film.
Yeah.
And that's a recent, somewhat recent film.
That is somewhat recent, absolutely.
Where's Sleepless in Seattle? Where's When Harry Met Sally? Yeah. These are popular movies, and they're well made, and they're terrific. They're movies.
But we have to, if we're doing this, and Mike and Steve, we have to throw things off. And that's our question.
Well, you start with the silent films. The silent films should be in a separate list. So
yeah, that's right. There's only two or three. I think Intolerance and Sunrise and The General. I think those are the only ones. But
I saw a movie the other night. Steve, especially you, I'm going to point to you. Did you ever see Notting Hill? And they used every commercial gimmick you could possibly think of, and it's also obvious, but it works. You know, it's a good movie.
The movie he made before that, Four Weddings and a Funeral, is another classic romantic comedy.
How about Pretty Woman before we reach
Pretty Woman, exactly, another huge one. It's not on the list. We've reached the end of our show, and as we always say each week, we welcome you to subscribe to our podcast. Arthur, Julian, Mike, and I love doing this show. We love sharing our love of film and all pop culture with you. Please sign up, and it's free to join our podcast. We're available on all of the classic podcast sites. We also have a Facebook page now and an Instagram page, and we love when you recommend us to your friends to keep this party going. And
Steve,
also,
I'd like to interrupt you for one moment. Please, to all our listeners, email us with your favorite choices. What are your top 10? What are your top 10 films? And let them be yours. They don't have to be everybody else's. You have the special choices. Let's hear from you. And the email address is?
All you need to do is write to talesfromhollywoodland@gmail.com. We also want to wish a very big happy birthday to our producer, Mike Faber. Happy birthday, Mike. Many happy returns. Absolutely. And to all of our fans, even though it's already been almost a month, we can still keep wishing you Happy New Year, because it's going to be a great year.
And from the list of the greatest country western titles of songs, we have I'm So Miserable Without You, It's Like Having You Here. There's also Thank God and Greyhound, She's Gone. Just so many of these.
All right. Goodbye and good luck.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, Leah.
Hey, Sean.
You know what now's a good time for?
What's that?
A promo for the Soul Forge podcast.
The Soul Forge? What's that?
Oh, it's a show. It's a podcast all about sex and dating,
Love and relationships.
pop culture and movie reviews,
Adventure?
almost anything you can think of.
Definitely.
What is it?
The Soul Forge.
The Soul Forge Podcast.
Think about it.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.